So President Trump is impeached for the second time. First president ever to be impeached twice. On the same day, for the first time ever, President Trump actually issues a genuine, articulate, and meaningful call for unity. It just keeps getting more upside downward. It's Rob Nelson Live. All right, hey everyone, welcome to the show tonight, our Wednesday night hyper interactive live stream on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Reddit. Love your interactions, love your engagement, love how you all dive in and go back and forth with me. I try to get to as many of your comments as possible. And again, if you're watching and you like it, follow us, share us. Okay, let's get to it. I mean, what a week, what a day, what a beginning of a year. So, look, this is the obvious news, not that it's a shocker. Trump's impeached again, second time. 2 impeachments, 1 president. I want to talk about impeachment. I want to talk about Trump's call for unity, and I want to talk about big tech censorship. And they all tie together. Let's start with the impeachment. Okay, he's impeached twice. Kaboom, boom, boom. Now, I get it, and I don't get it. He was impeached. 10 Republicans switched over to join in the impeachment. So I want to talk about 2 things. 1, why they impeached him, and 2, what it really means. Why they impeached him is pretty obvious, right? And I get it. I get it. Whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, you are outraged by what happened at the Capitol last week. And I understand politicians and pundits and people who say Trump had a role to play in that. I'm not going to go as far as to say I think he incited, a riot, an insurrection, a riot. Liz Cheney, who voted a Republican, third-ranking Republican, who voted for impeachment, basically said he summoned the mob, he assembled the mob, and he lit the match. And whatever happened after is on him. That's one way to look at it. He certainly did summon the mob, and he certainly did assemble the mob, and he certainly did throw incendiary things out there. Want to be clear. Trump was, and you can say what Trump really meant, and I don't know what he meant, and I don't know if you know what he meant. I don't know what he thought. You don't know what he thought. What he actually said is, now you're all going to march up to the Capitol peacefully and let your voices be heard. Now you can go, well, he didn't really mean that. I don't know what he really meant. You don't know what he really meant. I will say this. Trump spent the last, month and a half or whatever, 2 months, completely saying this entire election was stolen and a fraud. And I said from the beginning, I think there was fraud. I think there was abuse. I think there was a lot of fraud and a lot of abuse. And I think that the mail-in system allowed for that. How much systemic, targeted, hands-on fraud there was, I don't know. I'll never know. You'll never know. I do know they brought, 100 cases, to many of them in courts that were, had conservative Trump-appointed justices. They took a case to the Supreme Court, which is conservative, a majority conservative originalists, and that they have Republican legislature. Yeah, monkey arms. He's been inciting him for years. Not going to disagree. And we have Republican legislatures in most of all the key states that were an issue. And the actual truth is the only people who really can change the outcome of the election, according to the Constitution, in my mind, would be state legislatures. They could technically not certify the electors. I don't think there was ever an intention on the part of the Constitution of the Founding Fathers to allow an executive branch to do that. This notion that Vice President Pence could choose to do that. I think I said this last week. It is absurd. The Founding Fathers never would have intended that the executive branch could overrule the election. Never in a million years. And any conservative, I'm not conservative, I'm a centrist, but any conservative who's saying they should, you just threw your rule book out the window. I mean, you just turned on everything you believe about states' rights. So, no. And I will say, they didn't. None of the Republican legislatures did that. I will define what I mean by fraud. Give me 1 second, monkey arms. Well, I'll do it right now. What I mean by fraud is, I believe, and I don't know if I'm making this up. There was certainly a certain amount, and there always is, of shenanigans that go on. You know, whether that's ballot harvesting, you know. Look, I mean, they accused Trump. In 2016, Nancy Pelosi accused Trump Hillary Clinton accused Trump of Trump, Republicans of doing things like that, of voter harvesting, voter suppression, and in this case, they flipped the script. It goes the other way. They accused them of of ballot harvesting. The specific fraud I was referring to, the monkey arms, is the fact that you had the ability, because they weakened signature verification procedures. They made it easier for people to not be who they were or not have to prove who they were. And mail-in voting, you could I'm for expanding the electorate. I believe the more people that vote, the better. I'm not a person who's like, hey, let's keep fewer people voting. I tried to get, when I was in my 20s, a bill passed that would have allowed students on college campuses to vote on campus. And they could register as being in that, even as their residents. And it got shot down by Democratic legislatures, believe it or not, as well, because they were afraid you'd enfranchise a university, a big university in any major state could elect a member of Congress in a heartbeat, which is what I wanted. I'm all for expanding the vote. But I do think you need to make sure people are who they say they are, and I don't think they did. But I want to be really clear. None of that amounted to enough to overturn this election, or in a way that was provable to overturn this election. They couldn't prove it. They tried. They had every right to try and prove it. They lost in the courts. The Supreme Court turned them down, and Republican state legislatures refused to not certify. Enough said. Your own team was like, not there, sorry, or not there enough. And instead of accepting that, Trump went off on this crazy, I won by a landslide. The whole thing was a fraud. Everything was stolen. And his lawyers with all the machines were hacked, and that this was done. And, boxes of votes were moved. And again, none of it could be proven. And you can't argue all the courts all the courts are corrupt. All the legislatures are corrupt. Everyone's corrupt. When your argument doesn't go your way, you can't just say everybody's corrupt who doesn't agree with me. Trump didn't do that. Trump didn't go gracefully. I lost. I think I should have won. I think if we hadn't had mail-in balloting, I would have won. I think there was a lot of stuff that went on that wasn't okay, but we haven't been able to prove it. I lost. I conceded the election, and I'm back in 4 years, guys. So enjoy Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and a Democratic Congress. And if you like what you get, good. If you don't, you can elect me again in 4 years. Yeah, I agree, Fort Walton Bleach. Evidence is needed. They didn't have the evidence. Right. Yeah. Well, exactly. Burden of proof is on the claimant. Burden of proof is on the guys, and they couldn't prove it. And I've been saying, stop claiming you got something you don't have, but they didn't. And Trump didn't. And Trump fed that along, and people believed him. And for that, well, there's no justification in my mind. He should have said, I didn't win. Again, like I said, he could say, I think I should have won. I think there's stuff went on that wasn't okay. We weren't able to prove it. I'm back in 4 years, guys. If you like what you got in between, fine. I don't think you're gonna. That would have been the smart move. Egomaniac, couldn't see it. Sociopath, I don't know what. Just kept running down that path, Well, Pizzagate, Tyler, we're going to have a little talk, Tyler, about some stuff you've been sending me, because I want to address some of it as we move forward a little bit in this toward the unity part of my show. I am not defending Donald Trump at all. I'm actually saying he screwed up. And I believe what he did was not fair or right to people, because I think he knew. And if he didn't know, well, then I don't know. Again, I don't know what he really knows, but I think he did know, Yeah, I'm all about the YouTubes. That's why I'm watching this. Okay, thanks, Fort Walton Bleach. So coming to my point with this, but did he incite a riot? And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this thing, but I don't really think when it comes to speech, you're in a really dangerous spot. If you're going to say a guy saying march peacefully to the Capitol and make your voices heard was inciting a riot. Now, you can argue other things he said, the subtext, as I said before, all that you can argue. but it's a dangerous, dangerous precedent when it comes to speech, because partisans whip people up all the time, and claiming the election was a fraud, even that doesn't amount to indefensible speech. I mean, Nancy Pelosi claimed the election was a fraud in 2016. She said it was a fraud. She said it was basically stolen. So did Hillary Clinton. So did lots of people. They didn't do it as effectively as Trump. They didn't rally as many people up as Trump did. But does that make him responsible for starting a riot? I don't think it does. But doesn't make him free of responsibility, because he's the president. So as the president, isn't your job to keep order? Isn't your job to be the bigger person in the room? Yes, it is. And he failed miserably. So what does he get? He gets impeachment 2.0. I get it. But here's what I don't get. What's the point of impeaching him? How do I explain the vote counts being stopped, the 130% turnout, the 100% vote allocation to Biden? I mean, I've explained all those things before, Andrew. Thanks for joining. Look like possibly a new listener. Again, vote counts weren't really stopped, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff got said and then looked at more fully, right? They did say in the one case voting was stopped, that they asked the observers to leave, but they also kind of went back and had security footage in there, and they weren't stuffing ballot boxes, Were there, like I said, was there some shenanigans? Probably yes. Was it enough to overturn all the votes? I mean, at a certain level, I keep arguing half the country voted for Trump, and we shouldn't ignore that, but half the country voted for Biden. And it was never a landslide. It was never a landslide for either side. It was never going to be. Trump saying it was a landslide is total BS. Even if he had one, wouldn't have been by landslide. We're a divided country right now. As for the the other things, can you put that back up? The 100% vote allocation to Biden. Again, I think a lot of that's just sort of common sense, right? Trump's votes came in early, a lot of in-person voting. Biden got a lot of late, a lot of mail-in votes that came after, and a lot of those votes were getting counted in heavily urban areas that were highly Democratic. It wasn't a shocker. I did a show that night. We were all like, "Well, watch what's going to happen. The vote shift is going to shift when they start counting all the other votes." Doesn't make it fraud. But back to the point of impeaching him. What's the point, you guys, of impeaching him a second time? I mean, this comes to the unity thing. And Tyler, I said I'd talk about your thing because you sent a DM thing about a messenger thing about unity and saying, if we want unity, Republicans basically need to, admit they completely effed up, take full responsibility, get down on their knees and beg for mercy. I mean, effectively is what it was saying. And I don't agree. I think the winners are the ones that have to extend the olive branch. But what is the point of impeaching Trump a second time? He's out of office in a week. Don't tell me you buy Nancy Pelosi. He's going to do something dangerous. He's not going to do anything dangerous. He's not going to declare an insurrection act or start a war. None of you really believe that, do you? You really don't go that, right? I mean, that's just as crazy as the stuff he was saying. I mean, what you're really looking at, what you're honestly looking at is this is just vengeance. We want to get him. We know he's gone. If you're Joe Biden right now, do you think you want this impeachment? You are like, guys, seriously, you want to keep him in the spotlight more? He's done. He's leaving. He's disgraced. I'm president now. Can we move on into me? No, we got to impeach him again. We got to get him a second time. Boom, 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 boom. That's what it is. And here's why. Because they can't. Well, first of all, so he's now been impeached twice. He has to be convicted to be removed from office. And then they can ban him. So people argue they did it so that it could make him have to. 2000 was I agree. I actually agree with Snumpler. 2000 was a much closer election and should have been looked at. I mean, again, you can say not this one. I would say both. And what I would say in fairness is, 2000 was people did contest 2000 and 2005. People did actually do the same process that was going on with this and challenging the electors in Congress in 2001 in January, and in 2005 when Barbara Boxer and Congressman Tubbs teamed up. That was the only time they had a senator do it as well as Republicans. But again, to my point, like the impeachment, really, what's the point of it? He's already gone. You want to impeach him with the last 8 days. And it only matters if he's convicted. So you think he's going to get convicted? Well, first of all, they have to have a trial. If they have a trial, that focuses everything back on Trump and takes everything away from a focus on Biden's legislative agenda. Biden wants to get his legislative agenda through. He wants focus on that. So now they're saying, well, okay, we'll wait 100 days. Are you kidding me? You're going to wait 100 days and then bring Trump back into the spotlight? That's what you guys want? You want to give him the spotlight all over again, only to watch it fail? Because they won't get the votes they need. They'll get some, but they won't get. They need 2/3 of the Senate. They won't get, even with the new 2 Democratic senators, they won't get enough votes to impeach him. But even if they did, here's the problem. If your goal is impeach him so he can't run for office, he's got to be convicted. And then they have to say you can't run for office anymore. But guys, this is a really simple one. Impeachment is a political act. Purpose is to remove a president from office. And once removed, he can be barred from further seeking office. If he's already gone, how can you remove him? And I'm not making this up. I mean, I went to law school, but there's a lot of constitutional experts, George Washington's Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, and Dershowitz, I know a lot of people pick on him. He's a liberal. He's a Democrat. He's a free speech guy. But he said it's a stretch that the Constitution allows you to impeach someone after they're out of office. It only happened once before, a long time ago. And the guy they impeached was not convicted. So never went to the courts. But if you did try him 100 days later after he's out of office, and if you did manage to convict him, it'd go to the Supreme Court. And my guess is they're mostly conservative originalists. They'd overturn it and say, you can't convict him and remove him from office when he's out of office. He's done. He's already out. That's the whole point. Impeachment isn't to punish you. It's to remove you. If you're removed, there's no point in impeaching you anymore. There's no point in convicting you because you're already out. So it's sort of a moot point. And I don't think it would hold up. Certainly not that he'd be banned from office. Even if they convicted him and banned him from office, he'd probably go to court as a private citizen and argue, it doesn't work that way. I wasn't president anymore. So he'd win that too. So the only real purpose of impeachment is to get a moral victory, make him pay, and in the process, piss off a whole lot of people. Piss off a whole lot of people who aren't crazy, nutty, let's storm the Capitol types, but who happen to believe in the Trump agenda or are conservatives or Republicans who don't want to see this happen. So how does that possibly help move us forward? If your goal really is to move us forward, now that he's gone, if your goal really is to try something new, how does that possibly help us try something new? I have 10 days to live. Should I be able to die as I please without consequence? Wait a minute. If I have 10 days to live, says Tyler, should I be able to die as I please without consequences? No, Tyler, but it's not what we're talking about. I mean, again, you may really think Trump is going to go do crazy, crazy things. I happen to think he isn't. I never thought he was. That's why I don't really think he intended to stir these protest riots up. I don't think he ever intended that. It wouldn't serve any purpose for him. People say it was an insurrection. It was a bunch of people gone mad busting into the Capitol. I'll give you that. They were never going to overthrow the U.S. government. I mean, what planet are you on? Wasn't going to happen. Well, even if they did, I mean, they didn't go and blow people up, but even if they had tried to, but it wasn't that. It was stupid. It was wrong. It was criminal. It was completely reprehensible, but they weren't going to overthrow the government. I don't think Trump was hoping they'd overthrow the government as if somehow if they all stormed the Capitol, he'd stay president. If that were the case, he could use the Insurrection Act right now, and he's not going to, nor should he, nor would the military do it. I mean, at a certain level, you guys got to come back down to earth the same way you're asking the other side to come back down to earth around the election. Trump's not going to do anything crazy. The impeachment, and Tyler, impeaching him doesn't mean anything if you can't convict him. And you can't convict him in 8 days. They can't even get it to the Senate in time if they wanted to. It technically couldn't happen, and they know that. So your leaders in the Democratic Party know full well what they're doing. Nancy Pelosi knows full well he can't get removed from office by impeachment. Not before he's out. So the 10 days is meaningless, as you're saying, because there's nothing impeaching him, and Congress doesn't stop him from doing anything. She knows it can't go to the Senate. It's not Mitch McConnell holding it up. Can't. And even if they did, rush in one day, do a quick vote. Whole point, you have to have a trial. Witnesses, the defense, the whole thing. So that's going to happen, and she knows it. She also knows he probably can't be removed from office after he's removed from office. She doesn't care. It's not about removing. So that's where she's doing the same thing he did. When Trump's going off on his crazy election stuff and getting people to believe it? Are you buying Nancy Pelosi stuff that she really thinks this is a way to stop Trump? She knows it's not stopping Trump. She knows it won't affect one thing he does in office for the next 10 days. She knows it won't remove him from office any sooner. She knows he probably can't even be convicted after the fact, and he probably would not lose a court battle on that. But either way, she knows full well this isn't stopping Trump from doing anything. This is just getting him. So you got to play the same logic on your side and your leadership that you're asking the other side to play on their leadership. Well, Cruson, we shouldn't impeach due to the calendar, but it's not an issue. I mean, it's not a matter of that. The Senate can't come back in. It's not. I mean, the Senate's got all kinds of stupid rules, but Mitch McConnell didn't make it up. They can't actually do the impeachment any sooner. And they have to have the articles delivered. And the Democrats have no intention of delivering the articles right now, because the last thing they want to do is cloud up the first 4 weeks of Biden's presidency with an impeachment trial. And the Senate has to focus almost exclusively on impeachment when it happens. So they don't actually want to deliver the articles of impeachment to the Senate. That's why they're saying they'll wait 100 days. So back to my point, Nancy Pelosi knows full well she's not going to remove Donald Trump from office before his last day. And even if they could, even if somehow they could whip it through, somehow get it into the Senate, which they'd have to first deliver it, and somehow get the vote and the trial all done in the next 9 days, he'd get removed from office in his last 4 hours. And even that's not even a realistic timetable. Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew S. They are trying to take away and prevent a 2024 run. But what I'm saying is it doesn't work that way, because he'll already be out of office if and when he's convicted. Impeachment in the House is meaningless. It merely means they move the formal articles to a trial. They've impeached him. It's like a big ass slap on the wrist, a big stain, but then you got to get actually convicted in a trial in the Senate, which is not likely to happen, even with the 2 new members, because you'd still need about 17 Republican senators to go, and I don't think you'd get them. But even if you did, as I said, even if you did, which I don't think you will, I don't believe it would hold up in the Supreme Court that you can convict him after he's no longer in office. The whole express purpose of impeachment is not criminally to punish someone. It is to remove them from office. And if they're already removed, impeachment really serves no purpose. And after they are convicted and removed from office, they can be barred from office. But if you're already out of office, you're now a private citizen. You can't actually be convicted and removed from office. So you can't actually then be barred from further office. It would all fall apart in the court, the Supreme Court. So not happening. Why impeach Trump, though? That's my question. Just to make him pay. And I think that's stupid and short-sighted. And that's my thought on that. I really do. And you guys on the left, I really think I get your anger. I get your hostility. But is your goal to just keep us running? Because if you want your agenda to pass, even with a Democratic Congress, if you want people to get behind it, you're going to need some unity. And at some level, you're not getting unity by just continuing to go after Republicans and hating on them. And I know people like Tyler, you've said, Republicans need to get on bended knee first. Doesn't work that way. They lost. You guys are the victors. You got to extend the olive branch, or you don't. But then we're just going to be in the same screwed up mess we've been in, going in circles with both political parties doing nothing for the country. I don't think you want that. I think you want to try to get your agenda in, win people over to it. So win them over to it. Oh, absolutely not, monkey arms. Don't get me wrong. I am not making the case for Trump here. I just said Trump did the completely wrong thing. He should have stood up and said a month ago, I didn't win. I lost. Stop being crazy about it. Let's come back and win in 4 years. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. I'm not saying he wouldn't go after them. Of course he would. They're dirty politics, but that doesn't make it okay. More importantly, it doesn't make it good for the country. You can say Trump wasn't working for what's good for the country. Fair enough. You may think that, but then you guys work for what's good for the country. Nancy Pelosi's not trying to do what's best for the country and impeaching Trump. She knows it. She's doing what's best for her party, stirring up her base the same way. It's just as bad. It's just as It's just as bad. It's just as to me, it's just as disgusting as what he was doing. And it's just as harmful to the country into the future and shows no real sign of trying to make change and a difference. But let me try something here. What I do want to get to is move this along. I want to get to censorship. That's really the big deal for me in all this. But first, I want to point out that of irony of ironies, Trump actually, I don't know if you guys heard this, but made a video today calling for unity. And Crafty, we're going to try and play this. We're not sure if we got it right. So if we do, we're starting kind of in the middle of his speech, but I'm going to set it up. And if not, I'll kind of walk you through it. But what's amazing about this, if you haven't heard I'm not kidding. It's the first time I've ever heard Trump truly sounding, actually he's reading on a teleprompter, but actually sounding genuinely like he means what he's saying about unity, calling for nonviolence. Like somehow it took him his entire term and his second impeachment and a week left to do what he should have done 4 years ago. Meaningfully call for unity, denounce violence, denounce people who use violence, denounce people who use destructive tactics to intimidate their opponents, essentially denouncing the white supremacists, the whole thing, all out denouncing them. And not just like I have done it in a full-on way. He finally does it now. Crafty, do we have part of that video? And if we do, we'll just play a little and then I'll stop it. Let's see what happens. We may or may not have it.
Let's give it a shot.
I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement. Making America great again has always been about defending the rule of law, supporting the men and women of law enforcement, and upholding our nation's most sacred traditions.
Bear with this, guys. Even if you hate Trump, just keep listening.
Goes against everything I believe in and everything our movement stands for. No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence. No true supporter of mine could ever disrespect law enforcement or our great American flag. No true supporter of mine could ever threaten or harass their fellow Americans. If you do any of these things, you are not supporting our movement. You are attacking it, and you are attacking our country. We cannot tolerate it. Tragically, over the course of the past year, made so difficult because of COVID-19, we have seen political violence spiral out of control. We have seen too many riots, too many mobs, too many acts of intimidation and destruction.
I will get to the end here, guys. We're coming to the part I will stop a little bit, just a little bit more.
On the right or on the left, a Democrat or a Republican, there is never a justification for violence. No excuses, no exceptions. America is a nation of laws.
Okay, Crafty, thanks. So, guys, I played that because, again, I know if you hate Trump, you're like, but if you listen, I've watched Trump a lot. And that was the first time he's ever come out fully and said, one, no exceptions, no excuses, violence, harassing, going after your opponents, which is, Trump supporters have been accused of doing, as have people on the other side. But again, is not okay. Right after, when the things have erupted before, Trump didn't come out. He'd say, well, whatever. He'd kind of qualify, hesitate. Yeah, I did condemn whatever. This, he'd even say, I have disavowed or whatever. He actually comes out and says, it's absolutely unacceptable. If you do it, you're not supporting me. If you're a supporter of me, you can't do violence. You can't be that. You can't do what just happened at the Capitol. You can't. You're not a supporter of me. And if you are, you're actually not a supporter of America. And whether you're on the left or the right, we all need to come together and say no more violence, no justification. He's right. He just waited through, 1,200 days too long to say it. Well, I'm not going to go there, Andrew S. I don't know if she tried to steal the nuclear codes. I'm not sure about that. But again, I'm not defending Nancy Pelosi. I'm clearly not defending Trump. In pointing out this speech, guys, I'm merely pointing it out because how funny that on the final day, and by the way, you can say, well, he said it because he had to. Didn't have to. If you're worried that he needs to be removed from office because he's going to do something destructive, Well, that doesn't really seem like a guy doing something destructive. And you can't say he was doing it to avoid being impeached, because he would already, basically the vote had already happened before that speech came out. So he's already been impeached twice. And if you're saying he's doing it to avoid the trial in the Senate, no, because the trial in the Senate wasn't going to happen before, like I said, they have to deliver the articles. They're not planning on delivering them probably for 100 days. He'll be out of office by then. You can say he's doing it to preserve his reputation going forward. None of that really makes sense. The only real explanation is he's doing it because he actually thinks it's true. He actually thinks it's not okay to be violent. It's not okay. It's ripping our country apart. What's sad is that he couldn't do it before. He couldn't bring himself to unify once in the past. And that pisses me off. Because I said so many times, Trump was a train wrecker, a China bull in the China shop, all those things. I love that he took on everything, but just unified people. He was the worst unifier ever. And that's what we needed, was somebody who could do all that and still try to pull. You're never going to get everybody, but try to unify. Try to bring people together. Try to calm things down. Be the president. Couldn't do it until today. I will say, to his credit, he did it. And I think it's important that he did it. I think it's important that he did it before the inauguration. I think it's important that he put that message out there so that people don't go there. Fort Walton Bleach, I see the riot akin to bring your alcoholic friend to a bar. Well, maybe, yeah. Again, there's no defending the riot, right? I mean, I don't know if anybody's trying to. Well, maybe some wackos out there are, but I'm certainly not. I've made the comparison about the BLM stuff only to point out that I don't think it's fair to say that everybody who was a Trump supporter, even most of them, were there to riot. They weren't. Most Trump supporters weren't. And there were, hundreds of thousands of people there. Same way I said with the BLM stuff. Most people there weren't looting, weren't trying to riot, but some did. And it's okay to call out those who did, but you can't label the whole movement that. And part of the problem I have is it's sort of like, oh, now any Trump supporters must be like that. But my point about Trump, think about it, guys. What a crazy irony. He gets impeached twice. And the day after, as the end of his impeachment, he makes the final speech that he should have made through any time in his presidency about bringing us together. And he basically says, don't go there. We've gone too far. Don't go there. That's a good thing. Whether you like him or not, you should be happy he said it. It needed to get said. Desperately needed to get said by him. One, to prevent any more violence and prevent anybody from claiming, because people would say, well, he sort of telegraphs something different so they think it's okay. You can't hear that and think somehow he's saying it's okay. Anybody who does this is not a supporter of me, not a supporter of our movement, not a supporter of America. Not, and no exceptions. And he's right. Too late. But still, better late than never on a speech like that. Not for him, for the country. Yeah, well, I think Trump didn't throw anybody under the bus, and I think you missed the point there, to be honest. I do so love to suck dick. I think you missed the point. I don't think he threw them under the bus. I think who he threw under the bus is the people that needed to get thrown under the bus, the people who think it's okay to do that. And, I've argued for a long time. I think I'm not defending Trump, but the media painted Trump as if he was this racist, white supremacist, the whole deal, the whole time. And I never bought it. He's a Jew hater, yet he moved the capital to Jerusalem, did more for peace in the Middle East than any other president for 30 years. His daughter's Jewish, his son-in-law is Jewish. But he hates Jews, I just never bought the whole thing. I don't think he really, I don't know if he actually wanted the votes of the white supremacists. It's not like there were enough of them to matter. But I think he just was incapable of doing things because the media would prod him and he's like, I ain't going to do it. The guy had an ego so big and skin so thin. I think that's what Trump really was for so much of the time. The media would poke at him, and instead of being like, whatever, you guys, I'm the bigger guy here, he'd take the pokes and double down, which only made him look more like what people were accusing him of. Either way, he's gone from office in a week. We ought to let the impeachment thing go. Let's move to censorship, because that's the real big issue that's going on here, guys. And again, we can focus on impeachment if you guys feel like it's important. I would agree with that last point there. I think calling it insurrection is throwing gas on a fire. And I agree that it's deplorable. And I think, again, I think you can call it deplorable, completely deplorable, find it, criminal, offensive, disgusting, and every single person involved should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And some people should go to jail for a very long time. But to call it insurrection, to suggest they were somehow about to overthrow the U.S., it's an insult to this country, in my mind. It's an insult to how powerful our institutions are, to suggest that a bunch of people storming the Capitol could overthrow the U.S. government, as if that would even do it. Our government is so much bigger and stronger than that, Nor do I think that's what they were planning to do. I don't know what they were planning to do, but they certainly didn't come in like, we're going to take out Congress. But again, people like to wind up. Let's talk about censorship, because that's the bigger issue here, everybody. And I want to point out, I get why they went after the president. I'm not saying it's okay, but I get why they did. I get why, actually, both politically, morally, and I'm going to get to what Jack Dorsey said today. They hate Donald Trump. They hate him. Let's not pretend. Dorsey, Zuckerberg, they hate him. Most social media, but he was not their friend. And like so many others in this country, they want to get him. But I don't think it was just simply that. I think they hit a weird inflection point. Neat nefariousness 1. Calling it treason would be throwing gas on a fire, but what's the issue with calling it insurrection? Well, it's the same thing. Insurrection is treason, Insurrection is essentially treason. You're insurrecting against the government to tumble it, which is treasonous. I think to call it a riot would be fine. To call it a deplorable riot, a criminal act, and something that if you're truly an American, like a patriot, you don't do. You don't attack your institution of government when it's in the middle of a legal process of certifying an election. You just don't do it. But to say it was insurrection, just again, gas on the fire in my mind. I agree with that. Censorship. Focus with me, guys, here on this, because this is the big deal. I get the hate. Censoring the president, pulling his accounts down. I get in the moment, the inflection point. We got to do something. Give him the benefit of the doubt. Give Zuckerberg and Dorsey the benefit of the doubt that in that moment they're going, who knows what could happen next? We got to stop it. Monkey arms. You don't need to worry that I don't understand how coups happen in other countries. Coups happen in other countries by military force. So I understand fully well how coups happen. Coups don't happen because 1,000 people storm a Capitol. When 1,000 people storm a Capitol, or 2,000, or however many people in another country, they get gunned down in many countries. In full-fledged democracies, they get pushed back, like happened here. Coups don't happen because a bunch of random people, even thousands storm in, wouldn't do it. You've had countries where thousands and thousands and thousands of protesters have been out. I mean, hundreds of thousands. You can't storm the Capitol and win. You need a military presence to execute a coup like that. If the U.S. military had sided with rioters and suddenly turned on the government, even then in our country, it would be tricky. Our military won't do that. That's the beauty of this country. You disrespect, monkey arms, how deep and strong our institutions are to suggest that 1,000 or 2 people storming the Capitol is going to even has a chance. Nancy Pelosi doesn't in her wildest 80 years of life think that these people actually were going to overthrow the government. Even if they wanted to. Wasn't going to happen. You don't overthrow the U.S. government that way. Doesn't work. You have no means to control the power structure. You would need the military to do that. And our military won't ever do that. It's why we have civilian leadership in our military. It's why we have the system we have. Military leaders in our country are very apolitical, and it's a good thing, and it was built that way. The U.S. military is a pretty unique institution among militaries for such a large country. It's not how coups happen. Yeah, I would agree with that, Jimmy Stock. Well, not one brick thrown. That's not 100% true. But overall, Trump protesters have not been violent. And I said earlier, I don't think Trump protesters overall are violent. And that's not my point. My point is this group of protesters that broke in were. And I think they've been widely condemned by conservatives like Jimmy Stock. That's the point I think some of you miss out there. Most conservatives aren't supportive of that. They're pissed that you're sort of labeling as if all Trump supporters are violent, when the reality is the vast majority aren't. And you argued that same thing before on the left when people said protests were violent, which they were. There was a lot of violence. And again, it wasn't the Capitol, but during the BLM stuff, people were quick to point out that's hardly the majority. So people on the right are asking for the same distinction, to recognize that the majority of people who protested for Trump were peaceful and always have been. You don't have to like them, but don't turn them into suggesting they're all violent, because the vast majority aren't. I want to stick on censorship, you guys, though. I want you to stay with me for it. You can check out if you want and say I'm a Trump apologist, but I would say to anybody out there listening, if you think I'm a Trump apologist, then your perception, your view is in my mind is so completely narrow focused that anybody who doesn't simply say the woke line, Trump is evil, Trump supporters are evil, they should be stomped, is an apologist. I don't know which part of me was apologizing for Trump. I said I thought he was a narcissistic egomaniac who was incapable of exercising unity, and he should have done it 4 years ago, and he could have actually made this country a lot better. I said what he did was too late, but I also said what he did was good. And I don't care where you're coming from. If you don't think it was a good thing to have the president of the United States in a meaningful way come out and condemn any and all sorts of violence and say, if you do, you don't support me and you don't support America, and say it like 10 times. If you don't think that's a good thing, then I guess you want more violence.
Well, Rob, technically that would be the second time. The first time he did it when he was in front of Mount
I
Rushmore.
disagree with you. Nope. That's my point. This is the first time. The other times were like half-hearted.
Well, right. It was at a speech. It wasn't in the Oval Office.
That's the problem. He didn't do it the day of. He did a half-hearted thing. The minute that happened, he should have been out there saying this. He should have been saying this 6 months ago, about not about the violence, about unity. But he should have said this the minute this happened. He should have been out there saying, this is so unacceptable. Nobody who supports me, nobody who's an American is doing this in my book. And if you are, the minute, not a week later. Yep, I don't think he's doing it because he thinks it's going to get him off something. I think he's doing it because it's the right thing to do. Believe it or not, Trump could do the right thing. I know it's hard for some people to believe. But you guys, even you, Crafty, I want to focus on censorship because we're missing the biggest issue. Trump, again, has pulled the spotlight away from what the biggest issue is. And Trump being censored is the biggest issue. Not just him, but the level of censorship that tech companies are going to and what it means. So, and again, this is a big deal because censoring the president is not, everyone goes, oh, it should have happened. It should have happened. I'm going to get to in a minute what Jack Dorsey actually said today about doing it. Because for a lot of you out there like, yay. Well, you're going to see the CEO of Twitter's going, no, yay. No, yay about what we did. Didn't want to have to do it, did it. Think maybe it was the right move, but it's a really bad thing that we just did. And it's a dangerous precedent we just set. Angela, I want to show you some of the world leaders said about censoring Trump. And it started out, to me, I talked last week about Emily Ratchovich saying it's a bad thing if you can shut the president down. We protect speech in such an enormous way in this country. And if you can shut someone down because you think the things they're saying could get interpreted as something else. Remember, he was out calling literally, hey, guys, riot, protest. He wasn't. You can say, well, that's what people were going to think he meant. If you can shut someone down for having partisan speech, calling your people to action, get out there. Fight for what's yours. Defend yourself. You're going to start shutting everybody down. Maxine Waters saying, get up in the face of Trump supporters. That's inciting violence. Calling people to march could be inciting violence. But when you can shut the president, it's not about shutting them. When a CEO a media platform can do it. And I'm going to get to in a second why the fact that they're a private company isn't really the issue. Thanks for giving gold, Shamore. Let me show you what a couple world leaders had to say about it. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, no Trump lover. And Trump, as you know, and she have had a kind of contentious relationship, right? This is Angela Merkel, not a conservative. Twitter's decision to ban Trump's platform is problematic. The freedom of opinion is of elementary significance. Let's pop that one down, Crafty. Let me explain. In this case, there was a longer statement made through it, and the quote part. So what they basically went on to say was, her spokesman said, the idea that a private company, so this is interesting because a lot of you on the left are supportive of this, but you're going to see that it's a lot of the left-leaning governments, the more socialist governments, that actually oppose this because they don't think it's a smart idea at all to let a corporation be determining who controls speech, what speech is okay. It's not that they think speech shouldn't have any limits. Angela Merkel actually believes very firmly that those limits need to be set by government regulation. They need to be set by a governing body. You can't be letting private companies decide what speech is okay and what speech isn't. Okay, the president of Mexico, clearly not Trump's buddy. I mean, come on, who are we kidding? Oh, so that's not the president of Mexico, but you can put him up. That's okay. We can do him. This is the main opposition. Alexei Navalny, who's a huge Putin critic, somehow hasn't gotten himself killed yet. Called it an unacceptable act of censorship based on emotions and personal political preferences, could serve down as a precedent to clamp down freedom of speech elsewhere. Why is Alexei saying that? He's not a Trump supporter. He's not a fan of Trump because he sees how that precedent can be used. Okay, Crafty, you can pull him down after I go over him. That's okay. He sees how that can be used. He sees how other governments and countries can start using censorship and to let a platform have that kind of power, how that censorship could be exercised everywhere. He's already facing censorship within his country. People who want speech, the most important speech to protect you guys is the speech you despise the most. The speech you like doesn't need being protected. It's the speech you can't stand, you want to protect. Okay, do we have the Mexican president? Nope. We'll get there. Really want to get the Mexican president up there.
Let me find it, Rob.
Okay.
Yeah, let me find it. 4
names. All right, while you look for it, you can put up the French ministers. They're not there. The French minister. So he's a European Union minister for France. Again, socialist, left-leaning. And he was shocked, but he says, again, same argument that Merkel is making. It's in private hands. They don't want it in private hands. They find it in private hands. The idea that a private company can exercise that kind of control, that kind of impact over speech is terrifying into what it could be. Do we have the one for the Mexican president, or should I just pull it up on my phone?
I got it.
So Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador says, now again, not a Trump fan, right? I mean, he and Trump ended up working out a relationship that was manageable, and they did some things with the trade deal and all that, but not a Trump fan, not a Trump fan. And he went off hard on it. I don't like anybody being censored or taken away from the right to post a message on Twitter or Facebook. I don't agree with that. I don't accept that. A court of censorship like the Inquisition to manage public opinion, this is really serious. So, guys, thanks, Crafty. Why they're saying this is because the idea, you may like the idea that Trump got censored. You may like the idea that Parler got, Parler wouldn't censor itself. And by the way, in fairness to Parler, all those people they said were forming on Parler, they went and looked. The FBI said none of the main people they've gotten so far even had Parler accounts. They were all doing it on Facebook. So should Facebook be censored for letting those people organize on it? Remember, Parler was pulled down from Google Play, from iTunes, and from Amazon, so you can't get the app because they said you're not censoring your own content. So we can't censor your content. We just won't let anybody get your app. Come on. Seriously? If you won't moderate yourself the way we want you to moderate you, we just won't let anybody use you. And by the way, Parler came back and said, in fact, we tried to work out a way. A lot of the stuff that people have been putting up was stuff that was actually on Parler and had already been taken down before all this. Like Parler was like, we're coming back with a better plan. But the reality was a big part of what happened with Parler was just trying to shut down a competitor. I don't know that you can say it's because they were on the right. They're a competitor. Say millions of people were moving to them. These are companies. Their bottom line is what they care about. I don't get sure that you can say they care about the country. Twitter cares about Twitter. And Parler's a Twitter competitor. And people are dumping Twitter and going to Parler. Shut Parler down. That's why you can't have these companies having this much power. You know, I said before, the notion that you can go somewhere else, which is what people say. Well, would you argue that about phones? Because that's why they regulated phone companies. Because what if the phone company decided to just shut off a city or a county or a certain group of people who had views they didn't like? So use a different service, use the mail. Doesn't work that way when you have a public trust that people rely on. And by the way, before I get to, I agree with you, Monkey Arms. I'm not defending Donald Trump. I said he should have told them 2 months ago that it wasn't stolen. I get it. I get it. Done. Why are you still stuck on Donald Trump? He's out of office in a week. You got your new hero coming in. Why aren't you when can Democrats stop focusing on what they don't like and what they're going to do? You got a new president. You got a new guy. Focus on his agenda. Focus on what he's going to do. What's the Democratic Party doing? Obsessing on impeaching Trump with 7 days to go, knowing full well he can't even be convicted in that time. It makes no sense. It's cuckoo. But the censorship, right? The reason why Facebook, Twitter can do what they do is because they're shielded from third-party liability. So let me quickly explain this. They're not, it's this thing you've heard, Section 230, right? What that means is they say we are publishers. We're not liable for the content on our site. So you can't sue us for stuff that got put on our site because we're not liable. We're simply a platform disseminating information. We're not responsible for that information. Because of that, they get this legal protection. It was created to keep the internet open. It's called Section 230, in which you're shielded from liability because you're just a platform. The problem is they're clearly not that. By their own admission, what they just did was say, we are responsible for the content on our site. We are responsible for what people say. We will, in fact, censor, check it, limit it, throttle it, do whatever to manage that content. We will not just put it out blindly. The very protection they were given in their Section 230 was on the premise that you're not responsible for the content, therefore you can't be liable. You just put it out. They, by their own actions, have said, I am responsible for the content, and that's why we're censoring you. That's why we're banning you. So by definition, you don't get to be shielded from liability anymore. You're now saying, we're not just a generic publisher. We control what that content will be. That protection has to go away. But here's the thing. No, that's not what I said, Monkey Arms. I feel like you're not listening to me, man. I didn't say it's in a vacuum. I said his speech isn't in a vacuum. But this speech, you want it both ways. On the one hand, you're like, Trump will never say the right thing. Then when he says the right thing, you're like, it doesn't matter. Does it or doesn't matter? His speech isn't in a vacuum. I agree. But this one speech needed to be made. I'm not saying it redeems Trump all of a sudden. I'm saying it needed to be made. Needed to be made to tell people, stop. Should have been made sooner. Now that it's made it, can you not just come out and said, good, you finally made it? Yeah, you should have made it sooner, but at least you made it now. So there's not more violence next week. More violence at the inauguration. That's the whole point. You can't even be happy you got something you needed. That's all I'm saying. Like it doesn't redeem him from anything. I just merely think he's not saying it for some self-serving reason. I think he's saying it so people won't be violent. You should be happy about that. Let me talk about what Trump. Let me talk about what. Yeah.
Real quick, you should take a look at Jimmy and Tyler going at it right here.
All right, you guys go at it. That's fine. I'm going to let them go at it by themselves.
Jimmy was pointing out the lack of censorship when everyone's saying they wanted cops dead.
Yep, I see it. I'm going to let these guys go at it. You guys go back and forth. That's fine. That's what the platform's for. I'm going to keep going on this censorship thing because I think it's a big deal. I'm encouraging you guys to keep going. Maybe our government should create a platform subject to our constitution. Oh, gas socialism. Cruisin', you're going to have to explain that one to me. But I think if what you're saying is the irony of the regulation thing is that the right, who typically doesn't want regulation, is calling for regulation and some kind of trust busting. The left, who typically doesn't want it. It's sort of a role reversal, which is why I always think these dichotomies on left and right are stupid. Most of us aren't in them. The reality is big tech cannot go unrestrained. If you think it's a good thing that Twitter could do this, let me show you what Jack Dorsey said. Let me walk you through quickly, because let's go to the source, as they say. Let's start. He did a long tweet post himself about this, and I'll kind of walk you through it. So he sets up why he did it and why they did it. And this is a long tweet post, so I'm just doing part of it. And then he says, this moment in time might call for this dynamic, okay? And he justified, he said, we thought about it. Did we make the right move? I think we did, because we were worried about violence. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, just like I try to do with everyone. I'm going to give Jack Dorsey the benefit of the doubt and say, aside from his politics, aside from his wanting his platform to be the biggest and most successful, aside from the fact that power kind of corrupts people, let's just assume he honestly sits there and goes, you know what? I'm worried we could be responsible for something really bad. So we need to stop the president right now. It's just important. So he says that moment might have called for this dynamic, but over the long haul, it will be the destruction of the noble purpose and ideals of the open internet. Jack Dorsey is saying that while we maybe needed to do that, over the long term, doing that will destroy the open internet. A company making a business decision to moderate itself is different from a government removing access, yet can feel much the same. Okay, let me do the second part of that. So he says, no, go back, Crafty. I didn't get the second part of that tweet. Go back to the one before. I want to finish the second part of that. No, go back to the other one for me, Crafty. Yeah. Right, okay. Yeah. So he says, look, we all need to look critically at the inconsistencies of our policy enforcement. Yes, we do need to look at how our service might incentivize distraction and harm. Yes, we need more transparency in our moderation operations. All this can't erode a free and open global internet. So let's put the other one up. So he's calling, Dorsey's pointing out, this is dangerous what we just did. He said, you know, having to ban an account has real and significant ramifications. And he said, I feel a ban is a failure of ours to promote healthy conversation, which is an interesting point and a time for us to reflect on what we do. And now this is the part that I think is most critical. Having to take these actions fragments the public conversation. They divide us. They limit the potential for clarification, redemption, and learning, and sets a precedent I feel is dangerous. The power an individual or corporation has over a part of the global public conversation. That line right there, guys, is the key. Thanks, Crafty. It sets a precedent that I think is dangerous, letting a company have this much control over public conversation. If you are sitting there going, yay, Twitter, yay, Facebook, Jack Dorsey, the head of Twitter, is saying, I did what I thought I had to do. It was a gut call in a critical moment after something terrible happened. But what I did is dangerous. And to do it sets a dangerous precedent. And it is not okay for my company to be able to impact the global conversation that way. It is bad. That's Dorsey saying, I did what I had to do, but it's not a good thing to have to do it. He's not just saying, I wish I didn't have to do it. He's saying, me being able to do that, being able to silence that in that way is scary and dangerous to the open internet and is a bad precedent. He sees what's coming down the pike. He sees this will F everybody up. This kind of censorship is not okay to let a private company have the ability to simply ban speech it doesn't like, determine what speech is, decide what is and isn't free speech, decide what is and isn't an incitement to violence, what is and isn't true. That is not a role that should be put in the hands of a private company. And when you say they have a right to ban people, Again, technically they do, but they are also shielded by us from any liability on the basis that they don't do that they are merely a provider of information that's neutral. So when they start being not neutral for whatever reasons, they no longer get the shield that shields them from liability that allows them to do that. And they basically can get sued left, right, and center, and would. And their stock fell. It's not okay what happened. Social media should not be used for politics. Yeah, I agree with you, Tyler. I mean, there do need to be regulations, but those regulations aren't ones that I want. I don't think you want those corporate. The point is, you don't want the companies themselves regulating themselves. It's not a good precedent, and that's what you essentially see Dorsey saying. We shouldn't be regulating ourselves like that. We shouldn't be setting the global conversation. The free and open internet shouldn't be run by a company. And that's what Angela Merkel's saying, and the French ministers are saying. They're saying, yeah, but not by you. You don't let the company regulate itself. You regulate it. You set the standards. You, the government, set the standards for what is and isn't okay. And they all follow it evenly and fairly. And you break them up. This notion that their free market get to do whatever. No, we didn't let railroads do that. We didn't let telecom do that. When you are a public service infrastructure provider, you have too much power. You can literally cut off whoever you want. Like I said, the phone companies could have just been like in the old days. We're cutting you off. We're cutting off Orange County. We don't like you. You're too conservative. Or maybe they didn't like liberals, We're cutting off Queens. Go find someone else. Well, there was no one else to find. There were only a handful of them. So they broke them up and they regulated them, said you can't do that. Makes sense? Censorship's bad. Crafty, what's our time? I can't read the time clock.
It's over an hour. Keep going.
Oh, no. I'm determined to keep it shorter. Crafty, you want to join me for a minute for a wrap down?
Yeah.
You're miniature over there, Crafty. Come on. I'm not censoring you. You like being small? I want to showcase your big screen. Let's pull that off the screen for a minute there.
Yep.
So, Crafty, quick wrap up on this. Man, that hour flew, by the way, you guys. And I appreciate all your comments. I get a little worked up. Crafty, I think...
Just keep going. I'm just going to roll them through because there's too many. Yeah.
So, guys, we're going to keep comments coming on the screen. Crafty, I think the biggest thing, you're a techie. I think the biggest thing people don't realize is that to me, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right on this, that the nature of the open internet depends on not letting an individual company like that have the power to shut down speech. I mean, the irony, right, wasn't it Twitter called out Uganda like a couple days ago and said, you guys shouldn't be censoring political views. And it's like, really? Because you're doing it. Like, you don't want to let them, right? It threatens, I think Dorsey's hitting on it, threatens the very nature of what the open internet was all about.
True. And the internet and tech is all about trends, right? So the moment that you unlock Pandora's box for one thing, you can see it being duplicated thousands and thousands of times without restrictions. So it's like, imagine creating the internet in 1980. Look at how big it grew. You open the Pandora's box to censorship. Imagine how big that's going to just start going rampant across all of tech in the United States, where it's going to start. First it was China, then U.S., and then it's going to be the world. How are people going to be feeling that regardless of what they say, what they do, what side they're on, all of a sudden they're just going to be censored at willy-nilly because of some management in some company? That's literally going to happen to everybody now. That's literally going to happen to everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Great insight, Crafty. Thanks for sharing. Like your look, Crafty, with the headset and the little thing behind you. I'm doing some closing remarks and I'm out of here. Let's pull the comments down for a sec. Unless you guys want to throw positive things up.
I'll just keep rolling through. There's too many.
And you guys want to wrap up on this. Cruzen, dangerous to allow a politician to have that much power as well. I mean, yes and no, though, right? I mean, you're more on the left, my friend, right? I mean, wouldn't you rather a legislative body be determining that? I mean, that's how we've always done things. I mean, that's what the irony of this, like the left-right switching places, conservatives and old school liberals, like, not wanting regulation versus wanting it. I don't think you want companies, again, in the tech world, Dorsey gets it. You don't want them to be able to have that much control. It's dangerous. Once they can start deciding the rules of speech. So should one politician have it? No. But should an elected democracy be able to set those rules? And is it fair to break up the the tech companies so that they don't have that much power. Yes, because you have created an infrastructure like roads, like railroads, like phone lines in the old days, satellites now. You created an infrastructure we all rely on. So you have to make sure that infrastructure can be fairly spread out. You can't let one or two people control all the infrastructure and then be able to decide who gets to use it based on their terms, whether they're justified in their minds or not. You can't allow that. You have to allow everyone access to that infrastructure. And what we're clearly seeing is they're not. When Apple, Google, and Amazon all pulled Parler down as off the App Store, saying we won't let you get to it because we can't control your content moderation. And in fact, Parler's content moderation was better than theirs. Most of what was getting put up had already been pulled down. They'd already pulled it down, and they were working to try to do a better job. And Facebook, and Amazon was like, it won't work what you're trying to do. We can't do, but we want to. So that's the danger, pulling the floor out on that infrastructure. Not okay. Doesn't matter your politics on this, guys. Doesn't matter if you're left or right. We all depend on a certain amount of freedom of speech. And if you are going to let tech companies decide that freedom of speech is being limited because of something you say or might be construed. Remember, that was the point. Might be construed by some to do something. Every one of us is going to be liable to censorship. And censorship doesn't just, it's like Crafty said, it doesn't just hit one little thing. It starts spreading. And that kind of authority, that kind of power, that kind of concentrated power is scary and dangerous in any company, any person's hands. It's not good for any of us. Thanks for watching. See you next week.